Hello, everyone. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. The Hey Chaplain podcast brings you stories and wisdom about life in law enforcement, giving support and encouragement to those who wear the badge. Today, we return to the subject of developing leadership skills through reading great books. I'm a big believer in the idea that we should think before we speak, and we should read before we think. Reading good books is critical to building up good leaders. In an age where many people don't read hardly any books at all, let me encourage you to invest time in reading. It's a good way to relax, it engages the brain and specifically the imagination in a way that video never can. And if you don't think that you can sit down with a book without falling asleep, at least try an audiobook and listen to it while you exercise. My guest today is Captain Joe Grasela. Joe was recommended to me by one of his coworkers and the guest on my last book review episode, Keith Falkner. He told me that Joe was also an avid reader and enthusiastic about learning from history, and that was just about the perfect description. In addition, Joe's also a big fan of podcasts, so this was an easy sell to get him to contribute to the show. Today, we'll hear him recommend 3 books covering a variety of topics from mountain climbing to the Civil War to the nuclear disaster at Chernobyl. Listen to how he draws out leadership lessons from those stories that reflect on his law enforcement background. I'll add in a couple books as well, and I'll leave a list of all the books in the show notes. Here's Joe Grasela. Welcome, Joe. I'm glad you're here today. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad that you're able to come talk to me about some books that apply to leadership and personal development and that kind of thing. I love to read history books. And so what is the first book you have for me today?
Well, I brought a copy of Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer that I've read within the last year and kind of really stuck with me while I was reading it. And,
okay. What's that about?
So it follows this Jon Krakauer. It's obviously nonfiction. It's his experiences. And he was a journalist that was writing at the time for a magazine called Outside Magazine and covered things dealing with climbers and adventurers and people going out and doing things. And he gets onto a story where he's going to write about a couple of these, primarily one company that's taking people, expedition companies that are taking people to Everest to climb the mountain. He goes on assignment for his magazine in order to write about this company. I think he was planning on going just to the base camp and kind of reporting from the base camp and covering this. But as he's kind of working through this in his mind, he decides, hey, I really want to do this as well. I want to climb. I want to go the entire way. I want to summit Everest. So he talks his magazine into that, which is an extreme cost.
Oh, yeah.
Time commitment. There's so much training you have to do to get your body physically ready, get used to your equipment. They're kind of, one thing I learned about this is that when you're trying to summit Everest, there's kind of only a very short time window in the year that you're able to do it based on weather and temperatures and everything else. So they're up there preparing, getting used to, acclimated to the extreme altitude that they're already at base camp and everything.
Yeah, base camps, no.
Oh, it's no joke. So they're doing this, and, well, there's other teams that are doing this, and everybody essentially kind of picks the same date that they're going to try to summit. So very quickly you come into problems with trying to go the same routes, using the same ropes, climbing in the same area. It's crowded. Yeah. Okay. And as I've gotten into studying this a little bit more, that's becoming more and more prevalent of a problem. And people are dying now because of congestion.
Oh, wow.
And
what year was it?
This is in 1996.
Okay.
So they're going up, and they're dealing with sort of different experience levels for the climbers. There's one guy along that's a very wealthy guy from Texas that maybe isn't as qualified as a climber, doesn't kind of have the chops or the experience behind him, but he still wants to do it. There's some other people that are with him that are maybe not as technically proficient, and they're getting slowed down a little bit. They're dealing with congestion a little bit. And as they're going up, they have very specific time windows. Let's say this isn't accurate from the book, but let's say it's, 2 p.m. in the afternoon. We have to summit by that time to give us adequate time to get back.
Right.
And they're starting to miss these windows based on delays. The question is, when do you stop and when do you give up on your dream? This is probably their only window to do this. Yeah. So some of them continue. Eventually a storm rolls in, and we're not talking about just a light rain. This is, obviously a terrible storm, and they lose people. So several people die. This is the worst tragedy on Everest at the time. Single loss of life in a day, until years later there was, I believe, an earthquake that killed a bunch of people. And then they've had people die consistently over time, but this was in a single incident. They had multiple people from both of these teams die. And then there was also, I want to say it was a Taiwanese team that was climbing that day as well, and they lost people. And one thing that I learned from it is just that all of your planning can get kind of thrown out the window. You have to constantly be able to reevaluate something as it's developing in front of you. One thing I thought about as a supervisor is a vehicle pursuit. It starts, you initially evaluate it. Should it continue? Should it stop?
Right.
And then things change, right? So initially, maybe you have something that's fresh that you need to chase. Aggravated battery suspect, somebody just shot someone. Maybe you have a person that broke into a house, whatever it is, and your officers are behind it, and they're telling you the information you need, and they're chasing it, and you're deciding at that point, should it continue? But then one thing that, as a sergeant, and then now that I'm a captain, that I'm looking at the people that work for me, and I'm trying to mentor sergeants that work for me, is you have to constantly evaluate it and reevaluate it. Right. To determine if it should continue.
Because the circumstances are constantly changing, just like the weather on the mountain. It's a different scenario now 30 minutes later.
Of course.
The front moves in or
yeah,
whatever,
exactly.
right?
Your weather conditions, big thing for vehicle pursuits that change very quickly would be traffic conditions.
Yeah.
How many vehicles are on the road? What road are you on? Yeah. Suspects are trying to get away, so they're going to do things that they deliberately think we're not going to pursue for or to terminate a pursuit. So driving against one-way traffic.
Yeah.
Driving into oncoming traffic, doing things that are inherently dangerous. And a big component or a big thing that we have to think about is that kind of evaluating the risk to the public and weigh that against the need for apprehension. Am I going to be able to get this person later? Do I know who they are? Do I have any solvability on the back end?
Right. I think there's a great parallel between those two things too, between the climbing the mountain and the pursuit, because in law enforcement, there is something romantic about the pursuit, about being in a fast car, chasing somebody and catching the bad guy. There's something about that hits an officer kind of at a gut level.
This is
core. What I was made for. Yes.
I'm here to catch bad guys, and that's what I'm going to do. And, when you're after that guy, it's kind of like that dog that's chasing the rabbit. You're going to get him. Yeah. It's on. Yeah. He's running for me. This is a bad guy. I'm going to go get him. And you have to constantly, as a supervisor, know that that's the perspective that your officer's in. Right. Typically, now
they're already committed.
They're committed. They're invested. This is something that's personal to them now. And I don't mean that in a.
It's connected to their life purpose.
Yeah.
Right. And so similarly, these guys, they're invested in getting up this mountain. This is maybe their life goal.
Yeah, this is their lifelong dream.
Right. So without spoiling the book, because now I'm interested, I might read it. How many people on the team perish?
Oh, several. I don't want to spoil it because then you're going to be counting when you're reading the book.
No,
and going,
okay.
Okay, there's 9 people on the team.
Right.
And Joe said that 6. But several people between 3 teams die. Unfortunately, with Everest is when people die up there because of the conditions, because of the lack of oxygen, there's not a recovery of bodies typically for their remains. Yeah. So as you go up, there are almost points where there's human remains, and there's people. There's one that's called green boots or something, where it's a guy that died and he's wearing green boots and his body's there. Right. And because of the temperature, you got it. Yeah. It's a landmark. So there's places where there's actually you kind of know where you're at on the mountain based on what bodies are there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Fascinating. Well, my first book is a book by Ron Chernow. Of course, I saw the musical Hamilton, and I thought, that book is inspired by Ron Chernow's biography of Alexander Hamilton, and I thought, boy, I should read that book. And everybody was reading that book, and I kind of I don't want to do what everyone else is doing. So what else did he write? And I picked up his biography on Ulysses S. Grant. And
fascinating man.
It was so good. I made such a good choice. Mm-hmm. Just a fantastic biography. And let me make a small plug for reading biographies. A lot of people think, I want to improve as a leader or whatever, and so I'm going to get all these self-help books. And self-help books, in my opinion, have about a blog article's worth of good material. And then the pattern for most of those books is you then is filler. There's all this extra stuff, and you're gonna get all the same old stories you read in every self-help book, and there's not generally a lot of great material in those books. But if you read a biography, biographies are a fantastic way to learn life lessons and wisdom. There's just so much to glean and to be inspired by when you're examining someone's life. And you certainly, of course, have to watch out for the memoirs that are puff pieces.
Or self-serving.
Yeah, those are awful.
Speaking though, I haven't read it, so I can't say from my own experience, but from friends of mine that have read it, the memoirs by Grant are some of the best, they said, for not being a puff piece and giving a really accurate recollection of the way things occurred.
You could probably count on one hand the historical memoirs that are generally really well regarded. Most memoirs are not. and you got to watch out for the opposite end of the spectrum, the hatchet jobs, where it's like, oh, we don't like this guy, and we're going to write a biography and just absolutely tear him apart and judge him by standards that are not fair to
his time period,
right? Chernow's book is a really high quality biography. I mean, it is readable, it is interesting, it moves right along. It's pretty comprehensive. Covers Grant's life, early life, his military career early on, after he got out of the Army, and then went, of course, back in during the Civil War, and then after the Civil War and his presidency, year by year. I mean, it's really comprehensive and really interesting. I mean, Grant just had a very interesting life. But for me, the thing that stood out with that book was Grant as a personality. He was so trusting of people, and that burned him through most of his life. He would trust all the wrong people. He seemed to be a person of very high character, a person who, he had some problems with alcohol, but even that was exaggerated by people who hated him. And overall, though, he was just a very honest, sincere, earnest person who would inevitably find the one scoundrel in the room and put all of his trust in that scoundrel. And he basically did that in every chapter of his life, except for when he was a general in the Civil War. In the Civil War, he had great people around him. The people he trusted were extremely trustworthy, and they took care of him and did a great job. And a few of those get carried into his presidency, but basically he comes full circle back around to where he was early in life, where he kept trusting the wrong people, and every corrupt, crook would inevitably worm their way into his life, and he would say, "Oh, sure, here, take my wallet," and and they would just absolutely abuse that.
Yeah, he's just an interesting figure.
And Grant had a lot of really admirable qualities, but I think as far as like my big takeaway, especially after the Civil War during his presidency, is here is a good man who's trusting bad people. And I feel like that is a warning to us to be careful, who we're trusting. That people of low character are going to disappoint us. Bad people are going to do bad things, and that shouldn't surprise us. But sometimes we are kind of overly optimistic, and we maybe just kind of like them personally.
Oh, I'm completely guilty of that at times.
Yeah.
It's somebody that's charismatic or seem like a good person on the front, and then as you start to see their not just their words but their actions, and you start kind of learning about people, it's a heartbreaker. I feel that way. Like, I can completely relate to Grant in that.
It can be hard to let them go too if they work under you, and you're wanting them to be successful, and they just keep messing up. At some point, you need to let them go.
Right.
Yeah. And I think it also helps from the other point of view if you're looking at a leader who is trusting bad people. Sometimes, Grant's administration as a president is often considered one of the more corrupt administrations in U.S. history. It wasn't because the guy at top was corrupt. I really don't believe he was. I think that he just had a terrible knack. As well as he could pick a horse, he could not pick a human. And he'd always pick the wrong person. And that was his fatal flaw as a leader. And not that his administration was all bad, but there were some bad things that happened. And those were almost always people just one level under him who never should have been trusted in the first place. And sometimes good people don't don't pan out as leaders because of the people they surround themselves with.
Yeah, no, it's tough. You have, for me as a supervisor, when I had officers working for me, I always made it very clear that no matter what you do wrong, you make a mistake, you handle a call inappropriately, maybe even talk to somebody inappropriately, as long as you're honest with me, I can work with you.
Yeah.
If you lie to me, I hate to say that you're dead to me, but if you lie to me, I know from that moment on, I no longer hold you at the same point. I know that your word is not, I can't trust you at the same level. Now, you can kind of get back into the good graces a little bit, but I'm always going to have that reservation about you that I can't trust you completely.
Yeah.
And
most mistakes can be recovered from. But if you start lying, now we're talking about a form of corruption. And even if it's not the organization being corrupt, you in your personal integrity are corrupt. And that deception and that covering things up and cutting corners, that becomes a cancer in that organization. And that's so difficult to get past. And it's
exactly.
important for leaders to root that out if they can find it.
And then once you go down that, slippery slope or whatever you want to call it, but once you start down that road of dishonesty, it can develop. I have seen it develop from smaller things to bigger things, and it's difficult to see. It's tough. I'd rather, I always, as a sergeant, I always ended up having younger shifts. I worked in a part of town that we ended up having younger officers working. The younger guys typically, not always, but typically were making, mistakes of the mind, which I can work with.
Right.
They weren't typically making mistakes of the heart. Right. And that's a much different thing to have to deal with. If, like I said, you handle that call wrong, you chase a car, and I can work with that. I can teach you, and I can tell you why this is important and why we do it this way. But if you're lying to me, if you're ducking out of work, you're lazy, I just don't have a lot of patience for that.
Right. Now, we did not plan this out in advance, but I'm looking at the stack of books in front of you, and you have some grant-related books there. What do you want to tell me about next?
I'm a military history guy. My dad was in the Army for 20 years. I was raised in a military family, and my dad is kind of the scholarly type too. So he was in the Army for 20 years and then got out, went back to school and became a reference librarian. And he's an avid reader. He loves books, any subject. I grew up in a house with rooms that were filled with books, and I've always had kind of a love for them. I've also inherited a love of military history from him. So, and one of those things we talked about, Grant, is the Civil War being so crucial to America. So this year we read some books on the Vicksburg campaign.
Okay.
Huge Grant campaign. This is where Grant really, I would argue, kind of showed his competency and his ability to be a winning general to President Lincoln.
Now, this is the battle and the series of battles that are centered around control of the Mississippi River.
You got it, exactly, which is completely vital during the Civil War. So I was kind of focused on the Eastern campaigns. We're talking,
of course. Everybody
and
does.
I think, so I'm not alone in that, but, Virginia, Maryland, even, the Gettysburg, going up into Pennsylvania, working that kind of eastern seaboard of the United States into the South. And I always kind of didn't really give enough attention to the Western campaigns that were going on in the.
I think that is the trajectory that any Civil War buff, anybody that's studying the Civil War needs to. That's the progression that they follow. Is when they start to understand the Civil War, they grasp how important Gettysburg back in the East was. That was like this turning point in the war. When you reach the next level is when you realize how important Vicksburg was.
You got it.
All right, so that's like, now I'm really understanding.
Speaking of importance, one of the books that we read is called "Vicksburg is the Key," and the struggle for the Mississippi River by William Shea and Terrence Winchell, who we actually got to meet him. One of the writers, when we were in Vicksburg, just happened to bump into him at a restaurant. And
you're kidding? Yeah.
So I got. I did not have my book with me at the time. I regret that, but I mailed it to him, and he signed a copy for me. So I was super excited. Really nice guy. But so we read Vicksburg is the Key, the struggle for the Mississippi River. It's not a long book. It's pretty short, and it's really good. It's a pretty quick read.
Okay.
And the perspective that they put you into is exceptional. Another book that I read is just called Vicksburg by Donald L. Miller, and he's written a lot of really good books, including one of my favorites called Masters of the Air about the 8th Air Force during World War II. Just an incredible book.
Yes.
And kind of how those guys were fighting the air war against Germany in World War II and how awful that was. But that's a good one too. But I was gravitated to him just because I liked his writing style. I'd already read one of his books So I read that one. One thing that I learned was I did not know a lot about the Western campaigns and the battles that were going on during the Civil War. So kind of just a Cliff Notes version. Like you said, the Mississippi River is absolutely crucial to commerce for both the North and the South. Lincoln is kind of a Midwesterner, or whatever you want to call it, from the western part of the country at the time. And, through the Mississippi and the Yazoo rivers, they're shipping a ton of their crop south down the Mississippi River, which at the time is it's the superhighway of that part of the country for commerce. Well, Vicksburg, Mississippi is on the river. Essentially, the Confederacy know the importance of that, and they use it as essentially kind of a blocking position to prevent anything going north or south.
It's like a choke point.
You got it.
Yeah.
So it's highly fortified, and they know that this is crucial to them, and the Union also knows that this is crucial for the Confederacy to maintain its kind of power. But also, like I said, Lincoln is getting a ton of pressure to open the Mississippi, and they're kind of working their way up from the south. Obviously, they were coming down from the north, but Vicksburg is kind of holding everything up. So there's this big campaign, which takes place from December of 1862, ultimately until July of 63. Reading the books, I learned, one, a lot about Grant, which I want to learn more about him.
Yeah.
I learned a ton about Sherman, which I grew up on Sherman Street in Leavenworth. So I got to learn more about Sherman. There's so many things about that campaign that are so interesting. One is kind of a combined force between the U.S. Army and the U.S. Navy.
Yeah. Yeah, you got gunboats on the river.
Yep,
You've
gunboats.
got Army units,
transporting people.
and they got to get across the river at various points.
You got it.
Yeah.
So as I'm reading these books, I'm learning about Grant and kind of the formulation of a plan. Ultimately, they decide, hey, we're going to have to go across the river, work our way, and then attack it from the inland. Not attack it from the water, from the river, but we're going to have to go and assault it. So from the land. So it's this big thing. They've all these resources. They've got to work with the Navy. They get all these people across. This is Mississippi through spring and then summer. So they're dealing with disease, mosquitoes. Well,
and the mystique of the South. The South had a leader that they've felt like, well, this guy can't lose. And in Vicksburg is
Pemberton,
not something that can be defeated.
Right.
So it just felt like an impossible task.
Oh yeah, they held it up as a major, almost like a Gibraltar. It was
you can't come take this.
Yeah.
This is impossible.
Yeah, just try, but you're not going to get it.
But Grant does it.
He does.
Yeah,
and that's one thing I learned about reading these books and learning about this campaign is that you have to, one, constantly evaluate. Like they tried multiple things that kept not working, so let's try a new one. Let's try a new one. Let's try a new one. And ultimately, it paid off for them. They end up going across the river. They're fighting the Confederacy. They're losing battles. I mean, this is not an easy fight. One of them at Chickasaw Bayou that we actually physically went to. The Union is attacking. They basically have a combined effort with the Navy, bringing them to shore, and they're sort of like wading in like thigh-deep swamp water, attacking a elevated position that's pretty easily defended by the Confederacy that are just shooting down at them. And
horrible conditions.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, they're outgunned based on ranges. They're trying to attack. There's issues that they learn about logistics and supply that you got to load boats in a certain way so that you can offload them quickly in a certain way to have all your resources and equipment. So they get beat. Sherman gets beat there. So they go, okay, well, let's try again. Let's do this. What are we going to do this time?
Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not worth doing. There are some things that you do have to persevere.
You got it.
And because it's that critical.
It is. Yeah. And they continue this campaign for a long time. Ultimately, they win some key battles, which was awesome getting to see. I think within 2 days, I want to say I went to 9 or 10 different Civil War battles, just because there's so many there. But we got to go see all these different battlefields and experience it and look at what the terrain was like. So the Union is fighting these battles. They're winning. They're kind of pushing Pemberton's forces back, essentially back towards Vicksburg. And ultimately it turns into a siege of Vicksburg. The lessons learned in this, are crucial and huge just for warfare going forward. I mean, this was essentially trench warfare. As a kid, I didn't realize that trench warfare was really taking place prior to the Great War or the First World War.
Yeah, that's where it's famous, is World War I. Exactly, yeah.
And in reality, it's cutting its teeth, and it's happening during the Civil War.
Well, that's fantastic. Any other takeaways from Vicksburg?
I would say that communication is key.
Okay.
One thing I learned just Grant communicating to his subordinate generals is be clear in your direction, which I think he was. I think he did a good job of that. Taking it back to what you mentioned when you were talking about reading about Grant, and that he sometimes surrounded himself with people that maybe weren't the most honest or the most trustworthy. But in the Civil War, he had some great people around him,
he did.
including Sherman and then David Dixon Porter, who's a Navy commander. The amount of trust that they had in each other is incredible. And this joint effort of not trying to necessarily steal the limelight, that's pretty common in the Civil War. Look at me, look what I'm doing. I won this battle, or I won this campaign. And it's not such a, I'm stealing the thunder from other people. People are kind of doing their jobs, but not really trying to steal the success and the glory for it from each other. And they're kind of working together. And there's a couple documented parts of that campaign where, Grant saying to Sherman, hey, I need you to swing around and do this feint attack. And guys are kind of going to Sherman that work for him and saying, I don't like this. And Sherman's kind of like, well, if Grant says he needs it, we're going to make it done. We're going to make it happen.
Right.
And that's just the amount of trust between those guys is just so cool to me that, they trust each other, they know each other, and they're going to help each other out. So that was cool.
Well, let me throw out a book to you, and this one is by Bernard Cornwell, who is probably more famous for his historical fiction. He's got a couple different series that, he's been very prolific. He's got a lot of books.
I've read a lot of his Sharp series.
Yes, you go back to some point in history, usually some sort of warfare, and he'll follow a fictional character and write a whole series of books. He's fantastic at that. But he wrote a nonfiction book on the Battle of Waterloo. And so this would be Napoleon's big comeback. And there's just... the book is great. It's just extremely well written. The man has a real talent. Cornwell, the author, has a talent for setting the scene and helping you understand the flow of the battle and the things at stake, and just getting down to those just enough detail to really make it riveting. It's a great book on the Battle of Waterloo. But I think particularly one element that really stood out to me is the desire by the French army to recapture the glory of the past. Because, this is, just kind of set the stage. If you're not super familiar with this time period, you had the French Revolution, so they got rid of their king. And like most revolutions, basically like every revolution except for the American Revolution, you immediately fall right back into some sort of dictatorship. And so you get rid of the Tsar, you replace it with Stalin, and that kind of thing. And so they got rid of the king. Just a few short years later, you have Napoleon. He's now emperor, and he basically...
He's back, baby.
He sets out to conquer Europe, and it was a big deal, but he was put into exile, and the survivors from his previous Grand Army, they were like, well, we'll just bring him back, and we'll take over the country again, and this will work, because we were unstoppable before, and it's this...
Get the band back together.
Yes, exactly. Get the band back together, and this is going to be great, and it just isn't. They just believe Napoleon's going to show up and he's going to direct his artillery and it's going to go just like it's always gone before, and nothing goes like it had gone before. And the Allies beat Napoleon at Waterloo, and now the word Waterloo is like synonymous with your final crushing defeat.
It's not just a train station in London.
No, it's not. It is such a unmitigated disaster, and Napoleon never rises to power again. And that, I think there's a leadership lesson in that we can't just reset the clock and go back to how it was a couple years back, or in this case it was more than just a couple years, but whether you're thinking that, well, we'll do it like we used to do it, you may not be able to go back home again. You may not be able to reset and go back to an earlier time. Things change. And
people change. And,
yeah. And just because maybe you had a great leader in your department and the current leader, crashes and burns, you can't necessarily fix that by bringing back the old guy. Sometimes you just need to move forward. You just need to move on. And you can't fix it by going backward. And that's what these brilliant field marshals and soldiers of the French army, these were a good army.
Yeah.
And sure, they had been shattered in Russia and whatever, but the survivors, these guys were the most veteran soldiers on the continent. And they bring back one of the greatest military leaders of all time. I mean, it really is getting the band back together, and it seems so perfect. They were convinced they couldn't lose, and they basically got smacked down.
Yeah, in Waterloo, and then what was it, Quatre Bras, and then Langley, before leading up to the Battle of Waterloo.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just it's a fascinating battle. This is one of the best books I've read on that battle.
I'm gonna have to read that one. I do love Waterloo, and I have not read that book
in a compelling way. Yeah, and again, it just let's not repeat the mistakes that people have gone before us. The French, I don't know if they could have worked it out a different way, but they were overly confident that they had all the pieces that worked last time. It'll surely work this time too, and it didn't. All right, so what's your last book?
So the last book that I was going to talk about is called Midnight in Chernobyl, and it was written by Adam Higginbotham, and it covers the Chernobyl disaster in '86 in Ukraine and really close to the border with Belarus, but all part of the Soviet Union at the time. They have a bunch of different reactors at this power plant. One night they're doing a kind of a normal test that they would do, which they miss some things that go wrong with the test, and then they try to ramp it back up. They end up having essentially what they call like a runaway reactor, and it explodes. And several people were killed that were working in the power station. But more importantly, a metaphorical ton of radiation is expelled in the surrounding area, as well as the whole region. I mean, that part of Europe essentially is hit with clouds of radioactive dust and debris that gets pulled up into the winds, jet streams and the prevailing winds, and transported around. I think the Soviet Union initially didn't even report it. They were just like, let's keep this under. Which, reading the book, I learned that they had previous incidents like this before that never really got reported on.
Oh, wow.
And this wasn't like the first time this had happened. I think it was a kind of a station in, I want to say Sweden, that actually picked up the radiation. And they're like, whoa, why do we have this radiation?
Right.
Like, what's...
So a spike in radiation.
Yeah, what's going on here? And then they started figuring out what was going on. So kind of the personal touch to me is I was living in West Germany as a kid at the time. I was born in 1985. My mother was pregnant with my sister. She had her in May of 1986, and this occurred in April of 1986. So I'm sure I've got a lot of radiation. Kind of the joke growing up, I always told my friends, I probably glow at night or something, from the radiation. But just an incredible event. And the one thing that's interesting about this is that Adam Higginbotham, I think he's an Englishman, wrote the book, but was able to interview a bunch of people that have been involved in this, working at the station, at the plant, working... the first responders that were, firefighters going out there that night, all of the people from the Soviet military that were on essentially like the cleanup crew, if you want to call it that, working to mitigate the radiation. There's not a lot of Soviet propaganda and manipulation of what occurred. I think some people say it's kind of one of the best Western takes on what occurred there. Okay. And it's pretty factual and accurate, as opposed to a lot of sort of conjecture and manipulation that the Soviets are known for at that time, or just in general. I'm normally not one to read like horror fiction, but I felt like I'm reading like the scariest horror novel I've ever read. And then you're going, this really happened. Yeah. Basically, they talk about like the amount of radiation that the human body can kind of be exposed to, like limits based on over time. And they were talking about like the firefighters that are working, or even people that were cleaning up graphite or other pieces of the reactor that had been expelled when it exploded. The amount of radiation coming off of this stuff is like a deadly dose in like half a minute. Thousands and thousands of guys are out there trying to clean it up. They end up evacuating Pripyat, like 50,000 people. They just go, you're out, and you can go there now, I guess.
That's the ghost towns. That you see videos of.
You can walk into like apartments, and there's just like stuff laid out, like they're getting ready to have a meal, and it's all just there, like plates and stuff. And they talk about the impact on vegetation, surrounding stuff, like the trees, the plants, animals that were living in the area, all these things, and it kind of gives you almost like a minute by minute account initially of it happens, what we're doing, what we're moving forward, what's our plan, how are we going to stop this? There's a major I can't remember the name of the river, but there's a huge river that's a watershed area close to that power plant that they were concerned that the radiation was going to keep moving its way into the water source and basically eliminate this huge water source for all of like Ukraine.
Right.
So super scary. In my current position, I've kind of have to work with a lot of different organizations and entities. So I'm in what we call our community policing unit. So we work with code enforcement and zoning and other police departments, other agencies, other organizations and departments within our city government. And you start kind of running into a little bit of bureaucracy.
Yep.
Just the other day, we do cleanups on Saturdays, and we need trash bags for those cleanups to put trash and debris in. And we had run out, and I kind of communicated. I'm new in my position. I communicated with some people that had been there in a while. I go, where do we get these trash bags from? Like, where do we get them? Well, we used to get them from the municipal court clerk's office. So I reach out to them. Well, we don't have any for you, and it's not part of our budget anymore. Okay, so where do I go now? So, you kind of start following your way around to different departments, trying to see who can help you out, and you kind of find out what's in it for them. How do I sell this? Like, why do you want to give me some of your budget to do this? To a certain extent, that kind of like bureaucratic red tape that you have to cut through that people complain about a lot. I'm starting to kind of see that in a different light. And that was completely prevalent in the Soviet Union at the time.
Yeah.
You've
watched the bureaucracy of a government like that. This is the Cold War, the Soviet era. The bureaucracy is so entrenched and so self-serving that you start to see breakdowns in areas like safety at a nuclear power plant.
You got it.
And so it's not
maintenance
it's not just design or whatever and execution. It's also, like I said, maintenance and how well are we checking on these things?
Yeah,
and
keeping
how
up
long
with
have
it.
we known there's been a problem and that sort of thing. Yeah.
One thing that I learned, talk about the fog of war. Like that uncertainty. You only know what you know, and what can you count on? What's the unknown out there? And that was prevalent in a non-military, not a war. They're not fighting other people. They're dealing with an emergency. So some of the people are saying, "Hey, the reactor exploded," and other people are like, "That didn't happen." And they're like, "I've seen pieces of it. Yeah, I'm looking at the cooling rods that have exploded and been projected out of this building onto the ground. Like they're out there." And the guy's like, "No, that didn't happen." Well, sometimes you need to trust the input that's coming in, and you have to vet that out.
Right.
And in my position, I've also been able to participate in things like with joint incident commands with the fire department, with emergency management, with other organizations. And when things develop and things happen, you have to start evaluating it and start working through it and determining what you can trust, what you need to vet out a little bit more, what information you need to get that accurate picture to make decisions. And sometimes you got to make a decision right now, but sometimes you can wait 15 seconds and maybe you'll use your resources a little bit better if you make sure you have a clear picture of what you're dealing with and what you need to send.
That's excellent.
So just that kind of thing. And then working together, kind of getting that buy-in from people in other organizations or other entities to fix a problem.
And recognizing that when you're moving through that red tape, there are people who their number one priority is their own needs. Their need to be thought well of, their need to protect themselves or protect their future. And it takes a savvy person to navigate through that and recognize, okay, this person's going to be a roadblock because they don't want to look bad, or they don't want to be involved in something that may reflect poorly on them in some way. And so being able to recognize that sooner rather than later versus just assuming that they'll help because it's the right thing to do.
From the perspective of like a police department, I mean, a police department is an organization that deals with those problems all the time. We've seen incidents where activists will get out and start kind of pushing a narrative about what occurred and what happened, which may not even be factual. And I think what police departments are learning is when things like that happen, sometimes you do need to get out ahead of it a little bit faster, make sure that the accurate message is put out there. But I think the battle that police departments are dealing with now is when do you do that? Do you get out ahead of it right away? Like for instance, something that's always kind of a hot button issue is like, let's say an officer involved shooting where a police officer has to use deadly force on somebody. Initially, it was always like, hey, preliminary facts is police department is, shot somebody. We'll gather it all up and we'll get back with you later.
Right.
And now they're starting to realize that, you see some agencies are going out and like Las Vegas is one, like within the first hour or two, they're pushing out a YouTube video saying, hey, this is the initial facts of this case. Mm-hmm. We're going to reevaluate. I'll be back with you in a few days. And then we'll have a full briefing and maybe a couple weeks after that. But they're trying to get out ahead of it.
Yeah. Put some information out there right away so that a false narrative can't get started.
Yeah, or at least you have, multiple perspectives that the news and other people can report on. Like they talk about, I don't want to make us look bad. Well, sometimes we did something wrong and we need to own it, and it's better to get out ahead of that too, as opposed to...
Oh, covering up's only going to make it worse.
Yeah, and it's just going to make things more difficult later. And we talked about, like credibility and being honest and telling lies. And, you don't want to lie. You want to be open. You want to be transparent as much as you can. And, that credibility, that public trust, those things are crucial. Learning about Chernobyl, I was just like, well, I can't trust. Not that I learned this from reading the book, but I'm like, well, I can't trust the Soviet Union. Like once you lose that, you don't get it back. And I think that's what police departments are struggling with now. Is there's a lot of people that have a lot of doubt in police in different areas in different parts of the country, and it's sort of one of those things where if that's what the perception of the public is, like, how do you ever earn that back? How do you earn that trust back?
Part of the burden that you're carrying now is that your department might have been untrustworthy or corrupt, or at least been perceived to have been
the perception component,
or corrupt at some point in the past, and you're still dealing with it, which I always hate that, because I interact with a lot of young officers, and they may get painted with that same brush from something that happened before they were born.
You got it.
Let alone before they were on the department.
You got it. Yeah, it's
so
definitely
unfair,
frustrating.
But it is part of the equation you have to deal with.
Yeah, it's tough, and that's a constant battle, especially with law enforcement. And it is frustrating when you're kind of painted with a brush that has nothing essentially to do with you.
Yeah,
but you're still dealing with that and trying to change that perception that people have.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me. This is I've loved podcasts, and being able to be here and participate in this is awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I want to thank Joe for coming in today and helping me with the podcast. Joe's got a wealth of knowledge about history and other subjects and an enthusiasm for learning more. And once we started talking history, it all just came pouring out. In fact, the original cut of this interview was about half again longer than what you heard today. And it just killed me to cut out all the good, nerdy conversation we were having. But, alas, nobody wants too much of a good thing. I do hope that these conversations between me and police officers about the books we read serves as a model for you. You can take almost any book from history and draw from it lessons about leadership and integrity to apply to your career. You can learn from other people's mistakes, and you can be inspired by the successes they had against overwhelming odds. We need that, both the good and the bad examples, to be wise people moving forward. And when you read, use these books to build relationships with others. Talk about what you've read, find out what other people learned, and get recommendations for more great books. If you have history books that you think would be valuable leadership tools, please go to the Hey Chaplain Podcast Facebook page and share your recommendation with others. On the next episode of Hey Chaplain.
And you might be thinking to yourself, I didn't handle that situation very well.
Yeah.
So now what? Right? So those are the type of things that the day-to-day that erode an officer's countenance, erode their ability to think clearly. And so moral injury is very interesting to me because, most people don't realize it, but the more time I spend with officers and just listen to their stories, the more I realize they're not questioning the career. They're questioning themselves.
Yeah.
Did I do a good job?
If you like what you heard today, please share this episode with a cop or someone who loves a cop. The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guests and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. Thank you for listening today, and as always, pray for peace in our city.